What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're back on the Continental. Last time you guys saw it, we fabricated a full exhaust and we threw it in the trunk where the spare tire goes. I know you guys had a lot of comments about that, but we're gonna keep rolling with it. Now that we got our muffler and our exhaust all situated here in the trunk, we have our fuel cell in place. It's time to move forward, which is going to be closing back the trunk up with some metal panels, as well as finding a home for our Accuair Endo-Tank and our dual compressor setup. And so it's time to start arts and crafts. We're gonna be cutting up some templates. First step is I'm gonna be putting a sheet in here to kind of close off this section here. The fuel cell obviously will not be exposed. And then we're also gonna be building somewhat of a firewall back here. We wanna keep the heat and the noise, all that stuff from going into the compartment of the Continental. So yeah, I'm just gonna start cutting up some cardboard and going with it. Got the back section of our trunk design laid out. Basically what we got here on the back is a firewall. So this is gonna separate our cab from our trunk. And we got this little section of vertical wall covering our fuel cell. This is gonna be our deck lid, which is gonna hold our tank. And through here we have a fuel fill neck. So that's why this has to go up a little higher. And I'm not really sure exactly the angle yet, because I wanna try to get a different fill neck. Instead of it coming up so drastically, I'm gonna try to bring it a little flatter and then kind of jut up over here. So I think at this point, the first thing I'm gonna do, go ahead and take all this cardboard out. I'm gonna start coming up with some framing. All right, so first thing I think I'm gonna do is, if you notice here, this is a support which actually used to hold the hood hinges. We're not gonna be using the stock hood hinge. What we're actually using is a hood hinge out of a convertible Continental. So the convertibles, the trunk lid opens this way. It's a screw driven setup. So now that these two supports are not really going to be used, I'm going to go ahead and cut these things back a little bit. That's what we're going to do first, and start cutting away at some of the stuff and getting some framing in there. Framing is coming along. So we have our framing all installed for our back firewall. Then we have our new trunk ledge, if you will. This is where our Accuair tank is gonna sit up here. Then we have a 1x1 angle, slightly on an angle. It's about a 70-degree angle coming this way, which is braced onto the sides. So this will also act as an area where we could add sheet metal on both sides. We also have framing down here that we're gonna use for this floor. We need to add some over in this section, but I'm gonna hold off on that for now. All right, we got our template for our back trunk firewall all ready to go. I got a couple little minor adjustments to make, but on a whole, pretty much good to go. So I'll probably pull this out, transfer it onto one single template paper, put it back in. That way we're just perfect when we go to put it on the metal. Metal's expensive, cardboard is free. This is actually free cardboard. So since I got all that bracing back here, I'll probably spot weld it on, and then we'll end up seam sealing around all the edges just to make sure that our cab is completely sealed off from the trunk. That way any of the vapors and the noise from the exhaust doesn't go into the cab. Yesterday we put out the exhaust episode, and man, I didn't think we were gonna piss as many of y'all off as we did, but the guy wanted like an exotic supercar style exhaust, kind of like a Lambo, and I think we killed it. So sorry some of y'all don't approve of us losing the trunk, but trust me, this dude doesn't need his trunk. Right? Firewall panel fit like a charm. Now we're actually able to set our Accuair Endo-Tank in place. One hand, hold on. Okay. I think what I'm gonna do is continue just cutting sheets and getting them prepped. And then we can kind of design and decide on bead rolls and stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and move down to the base. I am gonna go ahead and make a piece that's gonna cover this nasty bit here. So I'll just do like a angle going down towards the bumper just to kind of clean this up. And that will be where my floor will die into that. And then we could figure out how long this piece will be on this angle. So I'm gonna get these two pieces, our floor and our cover for this, get those cut, get those laid in here, and then we can figure out the next piece. We got our two side panels installed quote unquote. I mean, everything's just kind of hanging around waiting. I might try to throw the compressors back up in here. There's also a ton of space down in here that I could possibly mount my compressors, maybe to the side rails or something, just to really keep this whole space super clean. But I think the next thing I really got to do is go ahead and get my fuel neck put together so I could see just how high this is gonna go. At this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get my tank out, get this piece of metal out, and do something with our fuel neck so we can start figuring out the rest. And then everything else is pretty simple. All right, that worked out pretty well. All I gotta do is, weld this back of this plate a little bit and get that to attach back to our box. That way we can secure the cap onto the actual body of the car. A couple clamps here and we should be good to go. But that's more or less what I needed for now. Now I know just how high this side piece has to come before we could start turning back this way. So we can move on. All right, once again, we're running into a little problem with our bead roller. We're not able to get this whole thing through that throat. Unfortunately, what we're gonna have to do is cut this thing in half, finish our bead rolls, and then we'll be welding it back together. All right, now that we got all of our panels cut, bead rolled, placed in there, fastened with some clecos, we're gonna start moving on to some trim and some louvers. I'm gonna make a nice louver to stick underneath our muffler here, in between our framing that we added, just to get some of this heat out of this trunk compartment. Definitely gonna do one down here. That way, the air is flowing through the bottom of the car, get it to flow through the trunk as well. We're gonna get that, and then we're gonna be adding some outside corners and some trim around all this. Reason being is once you get this in, we really can't weld it because it'll be impossible to get it out to paint it or whatever we're gonna do. We're probably just gonna add a nice little like 3/4 by 3/4 angle around the whole thing, which will get pop riveted and give it a real nice mechanical look. So I'm gonna get some measurements, go over to the plasma table, cut up some strips, get it bent up, and keep it moving. All right, now that we got our trim welded on, all blended, now everything is finally all clecoed in. I do have a couple little notes that I've made on the firewall back here, just at an angle to be able to fasten our sides on both areas, left and right. David's over there making our louvered insert. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out our exhaust and start prepping this bottom section for our louver.
So I got my frame welded up here, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna make some dividers here. We're gonna break into thirds. So I'll cut 2 flat pieces to weld into here, and then once that's there, I can measure out, see how many louvers I want in each section. So that is the next step. Okay, so I got a bunch of marks here. We're gonna have 11 different louvers running across. And I made up a little louver jig. That way we can get the same exact angle every time we got louver. So you up like this, line it up to the mark that you want to be next to on either side, and boom, you have the angle all set for you while you tack it in. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut a whole bunch more of these because I need 11 per, and we're gonna keep going down the line. Now that we got our trunk built out, next step is to make a mounting system for this Accuair control unit. So we're gonna have it sit right about here in front of the tank at an angle. They give you 4 mounting hole provisions on the back, and obviously these wiring harnesses are gonna come out the back side. So we're gonna make a bracket that'll allow the harnesses to come straight back under the tank to keep it as clean as possible. A couple will go to the actual tank, and then some are gonna run to the front of the vehicle. So I'm gonna start designing a bracket that will hold all of that. So I got my template here laid out for these mounting positions. Pretty much what they want you to do is drill holes in here for all 3 of these that will go into whatever you're mounting to. Those bolts will come up and you'll bolt brackets, and the whole unit will slide in and it gets removed. The bracket will slide and pop out by itself. That way you could bolt it in set the tank down and then slide into position and then put the set screw back in. So I have equal length between the edge of our piece and our template paper. I've also marked the edge to define our center. So we're completely centered over here. So the next step will be punching out these holes and putting center punch marks on our plate here. Lift the template up, drill out our holes, and then we'll go to mount all of our brackets.
One of the last components that we needed to finish up our trunk are our hinge kit for convertible Lincoln. Our plan is, like I mentioned, to open our trunk lid in reverse, a clamshell. So we picked up this kit and now it's time to have fun figuring out how to install it. So yeah, we're gonna get this bumper off and start playing around with where we're gonna mount our hinges to the back of the Continental back here. So those hinges live inside between the bumper and the body of the car, and they kind of come in like this. So there is going to be some fabrication and probably a lot of thought that's going to go into this, but I think between the wizard and I, we got this. We got the hinges mounted. There's actually a little dimple in the back of the car right here, which allows the back of the hinge to kind of get recessed into the body of the car. So that was there that helped us position the actual hinge. Then when you come inside of the car, the next step we have to do is build some kind of huge piece of metal going from the top of our hinge either to here or maybe off the back. So a little fabrication, some welding, some cutting, and we should be good to go. And that will be the first half of what it's going to take to get this trunk to open backwards. And then next step is we're going to figure out some of those Chucksee electric actuators.
Okay, I got my 2 brackets cut out here. And we're going to sit like this. They'll be parallel to each other. Okay, like this. The bottoms here are going to bolt down to the hinge, and the top here and the back side is going to get welded to the trunk lid. So what I'm going to do now is make a piece that connects these two in the center that's going to be 2 inches wide, which is the width of the hinge, and then continue that on to the bottom, and there'll be 2 holes with I'll weld some captured nuts, and that way you can slip hardware up through the bottom of the bolt hinge and just screw it right into your bracket. So while I'm waiting for this to cool down so I can smooth it out, I'm going to go back to the plasma, cut out 2 more pieces from either side and 1 more piece of my fill plate for the other side as well. So I got my mounts in place here, attached to my hinges. You see how this is going to be actuating, just like so. So now that this is in place, and I cleaned up the weld area on the trunk lid where those brackets are going to attach, I can move the trunk lid back on and start throwing tacks to connect these brackets onto the bottom of the trunk lid. All right, so I put the hood back on, jacked it up, rolled under, and got the hardware back on the hinges. And if I can do this one-handed, because this hood, or trunk lid, whatever you want to call it, it's very heavy, but there it goes. So you can see our two new mount platforms that are now a part of our trunk lid, and then you can see the hinges here, and that's how they articulate. Now that we're done with this step, we have to figure out where our actuators are gonna go. So we got this guy, electronic actuator, and right now it's in the closed position. It opens up another 12 inches from this length. So we're gonna have to figure out a spot to mount it to the body, a spot to mount it to the lid, where it will open and retract and close the lid full distance. So we'll start by expanding this, seeing where it's gonna land, and then making sure that it'll be closed in the closed position. We adjusted the trunk lid to the desired height using a stand, and then if we place our actuator right around here, see our end over here mates up with the trunk lid. This is kind of at an angle right now. We would like to keep it tucked closer to the side. So we're gonna have to cut out this rib here, so that way we can recess our end closer to the top of the deck lid. So the first step would be to mark this and cut it out. On this side, we have above our false floor, which is out right now, this framework here that we can also secure up with some extra pieces, but we could attach the end of the actuator off of here and achieve this open height. So we're gonna start by cutting this open. Again, this side mounted. So we are in the trunk is closed, and I've attached the actuator up here, and now we can get a very accurate view of where it's going to land. So there's our one of our air compressors mounted here. Our false floor is above that. Somewhere around here is the top of our false floor. So if we bring this up past that point, you can see this is the angle that our diagonal sheet metal piece attaches to. So it dips right through that piece and back towards the wheel well. What we're gonna wanna do is build off of this structure right here and the side structure and make something really stout and secure that will hold our eyelet of the end of our actuator, because that's where all of our pushing force is going to be. So I got my support structure tacked in. It's already feeling really strong, so I think when it's final welded, that'll be enough to support the pressure. And here I have the end of my actuator. As you can see, it follows nicely above our cross member here. So our next step will be making 2 tabs that come off of here that can catch the eyelet here, and then we could get them welded onto our cross member. Now that this side has all been tested, we're going to start doing the same thing to the other side. Put some tape on here, took some measurements so we can cut out the same exact section relative on this side to this side. Once I get this cut out, I could start building my plate with my catch bracket for the end of our second actuator. right, now that we've got all of our actuator mounts done, I threw in our backing panel and I made some marks on the back side as to where our actuator is going to pass through the sheet. Fortunately, since the bead roll was designed before the actuators, it's going to get cut off on either side, slightly different locations. So we might end up chopping this piece right here, making a new side panel, welding it in. But for now, I'm going to take it out, drill where I have it marked, and that way we could be sure that our holes are in the right location.
All right, guys, we got our trunk lid back on with our electric actuators. Andrew, actuators are on and they are working perfectly. It opens and closes just the way it should. Boom, there you go. Our trunk is opening and operating correctly. We have our electric actuators set. We have our new hood or new trunk hinges installed. We went and picked these things up at my buddy's house who builds some custom Lincolns. Convertible Lincolns, the hood, the trunk opens backwards. The reason why we wanted to do that is because like that, boom. So now our trunk and our hood open clamshell. So it's pretty cool. So in this episode, we got all this metal work done. We still have a little bit more to do, like back here on the back and on the sides, but for the most part, everything's done. We still have some more work to do back here as far as welding in our firewall and our floor pan. But other than that, next step will be finishing that up, and we're also gonna be jumping into the interior. Oh, and what's that? A little splash of orange in there. So finally getting some color in there. We're gonna show you guys how we installed our TMI bucket seats that are electric, man. These things go back and forth and recline electrically, so that was pretty cool. So we're also going to be doing a BMW console in there, so make sure you guys are watching, follow along, subscribe, like, comment. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.